Hey everybody, Countdown VHS here with another brief video update for Total War Wainriders. This is a mod for Rome Total War's Alexander expansion that is set during the Wainrider invasions of the Third Age, well before the events of the War of the Ring. And in this video I want to talk a bit about migration. One of the features of Middle-earth, especially during the Third Age, is that several large areas were remarkably underpopulated. Whether we're talking about Harondor after the Kin Strife, Eriador after the rise of Angmar, or just about anywhere after the Great Plague, there are entire regions of Middle-earth that really don't seem to have a lot of people there. And while underpopulated or essentially abandoned provinces may be lore accurate, in a mod where the player can choose to rebuild kingdoms and forge a new empire for himself, we thought it might be nice to give the player some options, as well as the other AI factions. And I also think the concept of migration is particularly fitting for a mod like this, especially given the late antiquity aesthetic that we've sort of drawn a lot of inspiration from. So migrations are a tree of buildings that will be available in certain provinces. For example, if you choose to play as the Kingdom of Gondor, you'll begin in possession of Gondor itself, south of the White Mountains, as well as an enclave around Umbar, and north of the White Mountains, the region of Calenardhon, which would later be known as Rohan. Now, Calenardhon seems to have been chronically underpopulated, especially in the wake of the Great Plague some 2 centuries prior. But as the King of Gondor, you will be able to do something about this if you really want this region to become a useful, productive part of the realm. And that's where the migration buildings come in. This building tree will give you increased population growth at the cost of some small penalties to law, representing the somewhat confusion associated with an influx of migrants. Once all tiers of the migration building are finished, you'll be able to construct a permanent resettlement building that will, once and for all, change the population group of the region to the population group that you have invited in via those migration buildings. Gondor is one of only a couple of factions that actually gets some choice as to which population groups they want to invite in. So you could go traditional and invite Northmen of Rhovanion to settle Calenardhon a few hundred years early. This represents the close bonds between the men of Rovannion and the kings of Gondor, especially during the Wainrider period, and would unlock some new unit options. Alternatively, a king of Gondor might choose to invite men from Enedwaith, the region between the Grey Flood and the River Angren, later to be known as the Eisen. This would unlock some different recruitment options as well as bringing that population growth. Another region Gondor could resettle is Harandor, south of Ithilien, between the Poros and the Harondor rivers. This region has suffered greatly over the centuries. In the aftermath of the Kin Strife, it became a battleground between the Corsairs, the men of Gondor, and the Haradrim. But as Gondor, you could resettle it. In this case, Gondor's options are more limited. They would be calling up pro-Dunedainic natives, essentially, to resettle the land for the king. And of course, Gondor is not the only faction with an interest in the region. The Lordship of Umbar is trying to stabilize and establish itself along the coast, both north and south of the Harandor River. And further inland, the tribes of the Harad are waiting for an opportunity to cross the Harandor and involve themselves in that conflict. Both of these factions, in addition to Gondor, will have migration options in Harandor. For the tribes of the Harad, migration is a simple matter of bringing in more of their kinsmen, essentially, settling them in the territory. Whereas for the Lordship of Umbar, there will be a choice as to what population they bring into the region. Another area that has seen a great deal of population loss is Rovannion, east and south of Mirkwood. Of course, the great power in this region is currently the Western Horde, one of 2 invading Wainrider factions in the mod. These factions can invite more of their kinsmen from farther to the east to settle Rovannion under their own thumb. On the other hand, the Eotheod, if they do manage to take back territory in Rovannion, can choose to repopulate it with loyalists, bandits, outlaws, and those who have managed to survive the Wainrider invasion in the area. And of course, one of the regions of Middle-earth that has suffered the most in recent centuries would be the territories in Eriador. The regions of Cardolan and Rhudaur have essentially fallen and become abandoned, and it'll take more than simply invitations to get these areas resettled. So whether you're playing as the Witch Realm of Angmar or the faction of Arnor, now reduced to the territory of Arthedain, you'll have to call on your own population to resettle most of these places. For these factions, the migration buildings will not only bring population growth where they are built, but they will also bring a faction-wide population penalty to represent the leaders of the faction resettling their own people in the new territory. Nothing comes easy in the north. Of course, once you have built up all the tiers of migration, representing the different waves, if you will, of migration into the new territory, and once you've constructed the permanent resettlement building, you can end the migration by destroying the migration buildings, and those faction-wide penalties will cease. Your new territory will be resettled and ready for business. This migration system brings a certain dynamism to the map of Middle-earth. While the initial state of population levels and growth reflects our best picture of Middle-earth at the time, the player has a certain amount of control in changing that picture, within the confines of what we find to be lore plausible. And it certainly adds to a sort of post-Roman Dark Age feel, in which whole population groups are uprooted and moved from one part of the map to the other, or your own people are obliged to work the fields of newly conquered regions. Now, not only does this system offer what we think is some good flavor, but it's also going to be fairly essential in the regions where migrations can be implemented. Those places will have extremely low population growth or even negative population growth. So in order to make them useful to your faction, you'll need to put the time and effort into resettling those lands. Now, as with all of these previews, you should consider the information in this update to be somewhat of a work in progress. We're still coding and writing the building effects and descriptions, and things are, of course, subject to change. But that, at any rate, is a look at the way we're seeing things currently. So I hope you enjoyed that peek under the hood, and let me know if you have any questions about this mechanic or anything else to do with the mod. Until next time, take care.